Yes, hello, my name is Ute Meta Bauer. I'm the founding director of the Center for Contemporary Art in Singapore, which is a national research center for contemporary art. We are part of a technological university, so what could this research basically mean? Our main focus is on spaces of the curatorial, but we indeed focus on what kind of knowledges are we producing in our field of artistic inquiries, of the space of the curatorial as a kind of like a knowledge container, but also how do displays function to communicate knowledges in a different way than, for example, a book or a peer-reviewed article. I would like to go through a few of the projects we did in the past years to give an idea what we actually mean, or what do I mean with this. So a project that we did a few years ago was Arachnid Orchestra, jam sessions, which was led by the artist Thomas Saraceno. Thomas is an architect and artist, and he engages with basically what is established by the natural world, what kind of communication does the natural world contribute to other forms of knowledge production, and is there a possibility of interaction of these knowledges, and also is there a communication between the natural world within itself but also with human beings. So for Arachnid Orchestra we established 7 months a spider lab where we had 2 different species of spiders, the Nephilas and the Cytopheras. And basically what was very interesting, Thomas found out that those spiders actually can continue the web of the other, which is very interesting. And also what is interesting in his research with material scientists, some like for example Max Bühler in material science at MIT, who look into the properties of spider silk, was in addition also a collaboration with biologists who look into intraspecies communication. So when we talk about embodied knowledge, it is also the knowledge that is very literally embodied in the cells, in each life form's way of communicating, may it be plants, may it be animals, or other life forms like bacteria, fungi, etc. So having this spider lab really, first of all, let us overcome the fear, the arachnophobia, the fear of spiders, and to realize that there are very different spiders. There are spiders that are actually not dangerous. There are spiders that are indeed dangerous. They are venomous, and others are not. And to really also engage with them in a way that allows for a coexistence as a precondition for communication. So to look into the embodiment of their knowledges, of their way of communicating, we had to share space. And to share space became one of the main tasks for us as curators and as collaborators of Thomas. He also invited 3 composers to engage with the spiders. We had about 50 living spiders linked to the exhibition, not all in the space. Some lived after the 7 months of the lab in our exhibition space. Others were kind of like living outside and came in for concerts. For example, hunting spiders who work more like in a kind of drumming communication. They do this kind of like dances when they are mating or when they are going to fight. And while the net-based spiders are communicating basically with their web as kind of like a string environment. There's also aerosolic spiders, like ballooning spiders, who interact with their other spiders of the same species in creating like large kind of flying carpets to move. So we really have to dig deeper into the way of their movements, of their interaction, in order to communicate with them. So each of the composers found a different way of being involved and interact with these spiders. And I would say this is not only embodied knowledge or performative knowledge, this is really an attempt to be more aware that our way of communicating, first of all, is much more rich than what we usually think it is, like verbal or in writing. Of course, we all know we have gestures, but then we know we have body language. We know there are our bodies smell, our the vibration of our bodies, the energy that we signal if we get into a space. But there is much more forms the way our body communicates. And I think as we slowly are discovering that what we think is the main or the lead form of communication is just one of many, and maybe even not a very sophisticated one compared to the quite complex system of communication, for example, of ant settlements, or as we say, spiders, or other forms of living. That brings me to another exhibition that we just recently had in our space, and that is the Posthuman City. This exhibition actually was asking, can there be a cohabitation, can there be coexistence within an urban environment? So we looked into artists who would engage with the lived urban space, but from the perspective that we might not be the sole life forms. This domination of the anthropos is maybe overlooking the complexity, the diversity, and the richness and wealth of life forms that are even in a concrete jungle, as we call it. And that reaches from bacteria, viruses, pathogens, as we are now all too aware of during COVID-19, and maybe also something we have neglected over the time. So, for example, Ines Duszak, one of the artists who participated in the Posthuman City, looked into the diseases of the Victorian period, also which was a period of colonization, of getting engaged with researching flora and fauna of other continents, of other countries, but of course it could be also in front of our door. And to look also into pandemics, into diseases that are linked to our bodies, like when we encounter other species, but also in vice versa. This counts also for other species when they encounter us, or also other human beings, if we enter from one life zone to another one. When we migrate a lot of life forms with us, a lot of bacteria, a lot of viruses, to which maybe other species in another environment are not prepared for. So, I mean, if we look back, for example, how is the impact from colonization of other communities, of indigenous communities, it's not necessarily weapons or like physical force by other human beings that led to the extinction or almost extinction of certain tribes, of people living there first. It's actually diseases, like we brought cholera, syphilis, smallpox, you name it. And it was often these diseases that really eradicated the populations in other parts of the world. One question is also, what is the knowledge that we have today? And of course we have major achievements made with medical research, with surgery, with like our hospitals, with the invention of medication and vaccines. But I think we should not forget how long this world exists, how long humankind exists, and how long the challenges on this planet exist. So actually the bacteria, the pathogens we are confronted today, such as malaria or dengue, they have been around probably as long as we are around. And well, we maybe have to figure out how did indigenous communities or communities exposed to those viruses or bacteria dealt with it. They actually did deal with it. There are medicinal knowledges in street plants, in nature, and I mean, even if we look up human-invented medical systems or treatments, from Ayurveda to traditional Chinese medicine, to herbal medicine, to people like Hildegard von Bingen, and others who very early looked into herbal medicine, and or somebody like Rudolf Steiner, who looked into the sonic, Buddhism looked into chanting. So there are other forms of embodied knowledge that on the one side we study in academia, but we don't accept on equal level as knowledge that communicates, that is not to be studied only, but that speaks to us and that communicates with us. And to a certain extent, I think visual, audiovisual, sensual, transsensory communication can help us to open us again as human beings for this kind of communications that we maybe have neglected for quite a while, maybe with the astonishment of new technologies that are of course amazing on the one side, but that also are reductive and exclusive on the other side. I also want to come to another focus that we had in recent years, and it actually speaks to what you're looking into. That exhibition was called Trees of Life, Knowledge in Material. And for this we focused on 4 plants, and it could have been more, but we wanted to look into plants that were native to their environment and that basically were in coexistence with the people living in the area where these plants are growing. And the interrelation the plant and the humans had, but also how these plants contributed to the livelihood, to the infrastructure of the people. It was actually 4 plants that we focused on. It was indigo, it was lacquer, rattan and mulberry. So we did invite 5 artists who would focus on these plants, who worked with them in their practice. So we didn't commission them, they study and work with these plants for a long time. And then we also had thematic days where we invited scholars who study those plants, biologists, but also designers, communities who grow those plants, and also to look into the possibility of revitalize these plants for an interaction with us humans, and also maybe to shift from monocultures back to a more diverse relationship to plants and animals as it was before, and to find maybe a better understanding of the complex ecosystem of biodiversity. Another aspect is, for example, silk, which comes from silkworms and from the mulberry tree. And so we looked through 2 different Chinese artists. So Liang Xiaoxi looked into which surfaces the worms might be able to cover, and he really kind of lives today with his silkworms in a condition, in an area where they feel home, and then interacts while a younger generation artist, Vivian Xu, also from China, who is very inspired by the work of Liang Shaoxi, looks more into the laboratory in the production of silk today, into coloring of silk. And so she studied, for example, a diet for silkworms so they can generate colored silk through that diet. And she also looked on which surfaces might they produce, and so she tested it in a much more scientific way, while Liang Shaoxi does it more in a natural way. And with Rattan, we worked with Sophie Pitch from Cambodia, who went back after his studies in the United States, kind of discovering this material of his native country, Cambodia, and he looked it up from very different angles. And he is not a rattan expert by no means. He wanted really this argument with the material, to find his way with the material, not as an expert, but as somebody who encounters it, who is kind of like coming home and being exposed to this material and had to learn how to live and work with this material. And I think it's this kind of process that also allowed him to reconnect to his country, to the violence the country went through, to the bloodshed the country went through. And so a number of his pieces also refer to this. He works also with beeswax. He looked into treating the rattan in a different way, to make it more sturdy, to make it sustainable, and really learn over a long period of time what could be done. And one of the big sculptures that we presented actually looked like a huge stomach. It was a huge organic hanging sculpture, organic form that was hanging. And to him, the stomach kind of represented also the Mekong River, which to him is a big stomach who feeds everybody, who at times vomits, who digests, who is a form that feeds a larger body, which is the land that surrounds the Mekong. So each of these artists really find a deeper way to engage with the knowledge that is embedded in the plant itself, but also with what it could produce. So Manish Nai, for example, worked with indigo, and indigo, of course, has been used in the coloring of uniforms or the coloring of buildings, and has been initially being created by the indigo plant. And it's a very complex, very long lasting procedure of cooking the plant, and etc., together with certain chemicals. I mean, it's not chemicals, but like different natural produced to create the paste that then could color textiles, mainly cotton, and that also has actually medicinal properties. So in certain areas, when somebody got sick, they would cut off a piece of the dyed clothes that they have, would cook it and drink it against their diseases. So these are very, very complex systems, and to understand the embodiment of those knowledges, it's really important to look into the knowledge that is indeed in the material itself, and let the material itself speak to us. So these are very complex projects, and I think to look into what is embodied knowledge and what languages, what forms these exchanges take, I think will occupy us for the next few decades. So it's good we embark in this, and it's also good that we maybe change the way we teach. It's not just books, it's not just texts, it's not videos, it's maybe time and space, it's maybe engaging in quietness with the community, maybe just being there, maybe understanding, maybe we are not even welcome. So I think we really have to step back from understanding or thinking that Western Enlightenment has brought us to lit up the world from its dark periods, but maybe we understand that this darkness, the darkness of the ocean, the darkness of a spirit house, is part of that knowledge transmission.